Gappers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. Today in the studio, I have my friend Brittany. Hello, Brittany.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, very well. And your last name's Sandaval. Now, totally off topic about mental health. Do
Yep.
you watch Vanderpump Rules?
I don't.
No. You're kidding, right?
No.
The guy, there's a guy named Tom Sandoval. It was Scandoval. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's the worst thing to have this last name right now. Or maybe you're related to him. And then I could got like an exclusive, but you don't even know what's going
No.
on. Oh, now you just Google Tom Sandoval,
Okay. I will.
please.
I'll definitely have to. Because, yeah, I was
That
like,
is
no, I've never heard of
hilarious. Oh my gosh. Yay. So,
it.
my friend, introduce yourself to the people, please.
Yeah, so I'm Brittany Sandaval. I'm a registered nurse and international board certified lactation consultant. I run my own business. I'm a mom of four and a podcaster myself. I host a parenting podcast called the Odd Mom Pod. I'm currently on a break in between seasons and will be coming back in the fall. And yeah, that's about me. I have history of anorexia and bulimia growing up. Had some pretty significant childhood trauma and um now as I'm much older, realized that I had a lot of issues with gender conformity, that it didn't make sense in my head and how that played into my body imagery growing up. And am now on the recovery side and doing great and teaching people and educating people how to live in their authenticity and going into corporations and teaching inclusive leadership and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's been a wild journey.
So, if we can go back in time a little bit, can you tell me how you got on the hamster wheel of hell, anorexia, bulimia?
Yeah. Um, so I was sexually abused as a child, which I
Oh,
think
I'm
is
sorry.
kind of well, I think when it's interesting when you talk about, I think eating disorders, it's very common to have like significant trauma in childhood. Um, I kind of had a really rough growing up experience. And then in my early teens, really found that eating and my body habits were something I could easily control when I couldn't control anything else. Um, Body imagery and, knocking the way that we look and self-esteem was something that many women in my family before me really struggled with. And that was a very common way to talk about our bodies. And weight was very much associated with, their thoughts on other people. And so it was just kind of conditioned in my brain. And so as I started becoming a woman and really struggling with changes in my body through puberty is really what kind of kick-started um, my eating issues. And it was bad. I would not eat for days and then would binge eat until I would throw it all up and repeat. And that was kind of how it was. And I had a lot of long-term health issues. I was very sick. Being in that time period where your body is supposed to be going through all these healthy changes and becoming, you know, hormonally and physically what you are supposed to be as an adult, and you're depriving your body of so many nutrients, it leaves long-term issues. And so that was kind of the situation for me.
You know, the more I talk to people, the more the names change, but the story is the same. And it
Hmm.
always seems to be around puberty, where
Yeah.
like the button, like that's it, done. And if you anorexia, bulimia is genetic component, the button
Hmm.
gets pushed, that's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with trauma, right? Because
Yeah.
no one gets on this train for something to do, right?
Hmm.
So, and I heard you say like you grew up, I'm older than you, I can see that, but when you grew up in a family of women who have been on the diet train
Hmm.
and constantly talking about their bodies and constantly putting themselves down, it's you don't know any different.
Yeah. Well, and you see that, that's how the people in your life equate their worth. And it very much becomes like, oh, well, if I want to be worthy of the people in my life that matter most, that is what is worthy to them. I need to fit into that and to meet those standards that they hold themselves to, if that's what that's going to be. And as a child, like you don't know. And even as my mom in that situation, she was very young when she had me. She was only 16. Um, and that in itself, also perpetuates for so many risk factors of other issues being a child of a teen parent. I live in the United States, and even more so, though there's not the government assistance programs or support for single parents that allows them to continue to break the cycle, right? Because when you're in poverty and you're stuck in your poverty and you don't have a helping hand up, um, you can't get out of that. But and also in some senses of the world, that's how our government likes to keep people, right? In the United States. And so it perpetuates this level of trauma and all of these kids of teen parents. They say that it's because they had a teen parent, and really it's because they didn't have the basic foundational safety that they needed growing up. And my mom didn't have the basic foundational safety that she needed as she was growing up raising a child. And so, of course, that perpetuates trauma. Um,
It's a
and
whole
being
nother hamster wheel of hell,
it
right?
is.
It
Uh-huh.
is. It's another hurricane. Another hurricane makes another hurricane. It's just a bigger hurricane, and
Yep.
you're walking the depths of hell.
Yeah. And I mean, and you just get stuck in that. And unfortunately for my mom and many in the United States, women are forced to be with very toxic men in order to help get them out of uncomfortable situations, right? Like it's okay to stay in abusive relationships because that's where you can get out of those poverty situations. And so as a young mom, my mom didn't also know any different, thought that abuse was normal. So she kept our her children in those circumstances, and that perpetuated to our abuse. And but then as a society, that's the expectation is that like, oh, well, if your single mother wouldn't have been a single mother and she wouldn't have been dating toxic men, but also my mom wasn't dating a toxic man that had money, we would never have gotten out of poverty. Um, and she did what she had to do to get a leg up, and she stayed in crappy situations so that she could go back to school because otherwise she couldn't afford to do it. And so, you leave your children in these abusive situations because you have to get them out of it long term. And
It's like
that,
selling your soul,
yeah, it is.
making a deal with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you just you do what you have to do, and that's why, the state of children born to teen mothers or single mothers, it's not the fact that the mother was a young person when she had a child. It was the entire rest of society failed her and continued to perpetuate that.
Well, that's hard. That's hard. So, when you went into your eating disorder, how did you get out of it? How did you recover? Did you go to treatment? Did you
So,
have
I
any
got
help?
heavily into drugs actually.
Oh, even
Mhm.
better.
Yeah. So it spiraled from addiction of binging and purging and restricting food to that not sustaining me long term, and ended up into a severe physical addiction. And a lot of my eating disorder recovery has been very much tied to my recovery through substances. And so I
12
didn't
step.
actually ever, not even, I didn't necessarily I sort of did the 12-step program. I ended up back in the church very young, which then brought in a lot of trauma with it itself, right? But that's okay. Again, deal with the devil, right? You do what you got to do to get through certain circumstances in your life. And they did have oh gosh, I can't remember now what the program was called, but it was essentially, oh, it was called Celebrate Recovery, was the program through the church. And essentially it was like a 12-step program. Um, but I specifically heavily went working through codependency on substances and others. And that was kind of the first real turning point in getting myself on like a mental path. Beyond that, it was just a lot of therapy and a lot of physical work and a lot of mental work and reconnecting with myself. And oddly, over years, that's how I actually created like a self-driven connection plan. It's called the 4 A's of unlocking abundance. And that's really what I speak a lot on to other people and in organizations and things like that, is about the path to self-connection and how we can really start to kind of realign ourselves with our core beings instead of what society and what the world has told us we have to fit into, and really kind of fitting into our own authenticity and harnessing that, and how that helps us be better leaders and just human beings in general, and how that unlocks a different level of fulfillment that you don't really find until you can get to that self-acceptance stage.
So, one, I want to thank you for being very open and honest, and that takes a lot of courage to do so. I'm not sitting here in judgment by any way, because I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of people understand when you have anorexia and bulimia, if you go to drugs or alcohol, that's anorexia and bulimia. I know for a fact alcohol are best friends.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have addiction transfer. And I've seen it over and over and over again. Addiction's addiction. I will go down to my grave saying anorexia and bulimia is an
It's an
addiction.
addiction, a
And
hundred
as soon
percent.
as you figure that out, the better off you're going to be. And the 12-step program, any 12-step program, is a great program. And I don't know why. And just from where I've been with my anorexia and bulimia in my long journey of recovery, uh, I've never seen someone bring up a 12-step program. And the only reason I knew about it is because I had family in AA.
Oh,
And someone
interesting.
gave me the blue book and started reading it that way. And I'll be totally honest, I was drinking way too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it was horrible. But no one ever tells you that
Yep.
you're going to have, you're not just going to have one, they have friends and they will come. So,
Yeah. And it's so easy. Yeah, I mean, like it's not easy, but it is an easy space in your brain when you're seeking that that essentially that dopamine hit, or that level of control, or that level of loss of control. Like, I mean, it got to the point where I was self-medicating with cannabis so that I could binge better and easier. And like, how messed up is that? That I was using a medication that I now daily use in my recovery as a form of self-medication and anxiety, and like it's changed my life. But at that sense, I was using it as a way to perpetuate my addiction. Like,
yeah.
it is, and until you can get to that mindset and understand that your control of wanting to control your body, what it looks like, or control what goes in your body or what comes out of your body, or all of that is essentially just your brain being addicted to that sense of control and that sense of like dopamine or serotonin response that you get when you are in that control. And when you're in that addiction mindset, and the eating disorder isn't as much of an option because it started to become physically apparent, right? And then I started getting other people saying things about my appearance, and it wasn't giving me the same. It just wasn't. And you move over to drugs, and that is a much harder, faster physically hit. And then I found, oh, like, okay, when I do coke, I don't eat. So like that actually kind of helps play into what I'm working for here. And now I'm losing weight because I'm not eating because of the drugs.
Okay.
And until you can really break down that addiction cycle in your brain and understand where it's coming from, it's makes recovery so much harder.
It really does. And the lack of education with people who don't who don't see it, right? Like a lot of people just think, oh, well, eat a cheeseburger, you'll be fine. It doesn't work like that.
Mm-mm.
It's not about food and you say it, control. It's control. It comes from somewhere else. And yeah, some people turn to drugs, some people turn to alcohol, some people binge eat, whatever your vice is, right? Some people
Yeah.
shop, sex addiction.
Uh-huh.
But now, like the
Well,
social
now the
media
social media
addiction,
addiction. Uh-huh.
right? And it's so hard, especially with weight, because and I'm not taking this away from anybody. I have total empathy for people with drugs, alcohol, all that. But you don't need that to live. But when it's coming down to food, And with the social media, if you don't mind talking about that for a bit, just because you are younger, I didn't grow up
Yeah.
with social media, right? So I know it's a whole different ballgame for you guys.
Yeah. And I
You
mean, and
constantly
I'm
look at
older
that.
than I look. I'm in my 30s, so I look like I'm a baby, but I'm not. But yeah,
Oh no,
social
I'm
media.
sorry. I don't mean to
Oh,
sound rude. No, no,
no,
no,
no,
no.
no, no,
Just
no,
I'm
not at all.
46. So
Yeah,
I know
there's
I'm
a difference.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
But
like, you look
10 years,
phenomenal, by the way.
oh, thank you. 10 years makes a big difference, right?
hmm
So,
Yeah. Um, Social media was hard because it started like I started on MySpace, which was kind of not so that was not social media like social media is now. It's very different. Um, I when I was kind of at the height of my addiction in all of the things, I really wasn't on social media much because I was very honestly barely surviving. Um, and so it wasn't as much of a thing for me, but I did find in my recovery as I got heavily into the church and I started to make bigger things and then I had my first daughter very young at night. Well, I guess I was technically 21 when she was born, but she was born with a rare genetic disorder. And so we created a like Facebook account to kind of update people on her condition. She was in the hospital a lot in and out of the time. And that was really kind of my first touch with attention on social media. And it was a really weird place to be because I was updating on my kid's medical condition, but like in a weird way, I was still getting like that dopamine response of like, the interaction. And especially in that point of my life when I was so isolated, one, physically being in the hospital with my kid, but I had very much quickly jumped from being at the height of my depression and anxiety and addiction and um, to falling into the church and then very quickly falling and conforming into exactly what the church wanted me to do. So I got married very young. And then I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 19, and they told me I likely wouldn't be able to have children of my own if I waited more than another 10 years or so. And so I married my best friend at 20, and we had kids, and then our kids had health conditions, and it was a place where I wasn't mentally sound enough. I was still very early in my recovery. Like I really struggled, and not eating was easy and it was easy to kind of fall back into eating habits when I couldn't follow my substance habits.
right.
And I've very found in my life that um if I can't control one thing, like it's so easy to fall back into that disordered eating.
Mhm.
And even still, as somebody who's I'm definitely not recovered. It's something I will struggle with for the rest of my life. It never goes away, right? Like I still have to eat specific foods in a specific way to like
Mhm.
help my body to like I can eat that and I'm fine, but like I got to cut it up a weird way or I have to pull it apart in a certain way. I'll eat it all and I'm not going to destroy myself for eating it. I'm not going to make myself go puke it up, but like I still do have to have a sense of that control. Um, and when you're in that social media pit, and you're getting positive reinforcement for, oh, you've lost so much weight, you look great. Like, oh, cool, you look great. And I'm like, I'm
Mhm.
getting myself that hype what I need, and it's dangerous. And I think it's especially now with Instagram and TikTok and the how young our children have access to these opinions from other people. And when we already are in so heavily a society that is focused on outward appearance and weight and girls' bodies looking a specific way to equate to their worthiness, right? It's dangerous. And I think it's drastically made it more difficult for people to avoid being triggered in that eating disorder, like you said, that like push button sense. I think social media can very easily be a push button sense, but we're not educating our kids enough, and a lot of people aren't in a healed enough state where they can educate their kids to break that cycle. And that's really what, when I speak on like all these different parts of leadership and living in our authenticity of leaders and things like that, a lot of it is being aware of our language and our thought and how we feel about ourselves and what words we're portraying to those around us, because you really can't change the narrative of the mind of somebody else if your outward narrative is what they're telling them in their head. You have to break that cycle. And so I think the biggest thing that we can do to fight the social media situation is self-awareness, right? And self-connection and aligning ourselves and being able to stay grounded in ourselves and our mental capacity, and educate our children how to stay off of that dopamine hitting train, and find that fulfillment in themselves, because that's going to be the only way that you can genuinely recover into a point where you're not going to recover. It's never going to go away. But when you can recover to a point where you can live your daily life and say, this is how it impacts my life, but I'm still in control of myself and my feelings and my alignment, and I can take the actions that I need to without letting that tiny piece kind of overtake everything.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I've talked to people who are like, yeah, no, you can get full recovery. It's like it never happened.
Mm-mm.
Or I'm with you. I'm like, no, it's as much as there's a part, it's the nose on my face. It's
Yeah.
always going to be with me and making conscious decisions every day. And it's hard with social media or even family. I talked about I was at my uncle's funeral and there's my mom and my aunts all in their 70s and they're all picking on themselves. And I just started recovery. So I started recovering in January. So it was like November.
Oh, this is a really early adventure for you. You're
Yeah.
doing amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, and I'm sitting there like Rain Man, my hands over my ears. I'm like, all food's good food, all food's good food, all food's good food. And they're just, and I'm like, are you on glue? Like, I'm sitting right here. And I do go with, like it's not everyone's job to go around me and watch what they say, right? But to a
Hmm.
certain point, and then I'm thinking, you're 70 years old. Are you fucking tired? Aren't
Aren't you
you
sick of it?
tired? Right? Like, well, what are you gonna do? It's not even 70, you're like 75. Jesus Christ, like get over it. Eat
Well, and
pizza
and
and shut up.
and honestly, like at this point, like who the hell are you trying to impress?
Well,
But
there's that, right?
like you're 75 years old.
Right.
I mean, like I'm sure that like, but really, like when everybody is old and flabby, like it's cool, right? But honestly, I think, it has to get to this point where it that is such a is how their brain is literally formed. It is
Mhm.
how the synapses are formed. That is how the thoughts go, and that is the only thought process their brain has. Um, and unless you are actively working and being aware of that thought and catching it mid thought and saying, I'm not going to think that way and I'm going to change it, those synapses don't change. And it's so hard when you're in recovery and you are doing the work and you're changing your synapses and you're changing your narrative, but the rest of the world around you doesn't. And it's really hard. And that's, where I speak so much about self-connection is at the end of the day, you have to learn how to build that deep innate sense of connection where you can tap into that and you can be in your narrative and you can get to the point where you're never going to stop hearing that, but you can get to the point where you can turn it off and like you can say all of that and you get to this healthy point where you're just like, I can't imagine living like that. You almost start to feel bad
Sorry.
for people
Yeah.
that
Oh,
are
for
stuck like
for
that.
sure. For
It's
sure. And
sad.
it's so hard. Like it's one thing, I mean, I can take it, right? Like I'm a
Yeah.
tough little cookie. But when it's
The
your
children they're
family
around, the
and
children they're around too. And that's what's continuing to perpetuate
yeah,
it, right? Is it's not you that you're worried about, but like the 12-year-old or 16-year-old or 25-year-old other girls that are sitting in that room, or even boys now. Like we're noting that that is even starting to significantly impact boys in general too. But it's hard and
it
their
is hard.
brain
And I
is
will say
forming.
my sister has girls, I have boys. My
Mm,
boys are 18 and 15, and she's got an 8-year-old daughter and
ooh,
16-year-old stepdaughter. And she made it her mission. She was like, there, because I know how I grew up in my house, right?
mm-hmm.
And she was like, that's not going to happen here. I
Yep.
will never bring my kid back into this house, like talking to my parents. Never again. You will never
Yep.
see us. And I was like, well, good for you, man. Right? But it is hard. And then TV and every, now I don't want to get sued. The medication always tries to
Yes.
get in line. Uh-huh.
Yeah, right.
But like, and it's so hard because I'm one of those women, 46 years old, watching Housewives because I'm addicted to that crap.
It's
I
so
admit
good.
it,
I love
right?
trash TV.
It's mindless television. I love everyone's rich and everyone's got problems somehow. I'm supposed to care. But as I'm watching in the last year, I'm like, they have new bodies and new heads. And I'm not against plastic surgery. If I had money, damn it, I wouldn't look like this either. But, you know, here we are. It's just, but now it's everybody. And I'm watching on TikTok because I'm horrible. I don't have cable, I have TikTok. And all these people talking about their hair thinning. And you can see it in their teeth,
Hmm.
right? Like you can see the gaunt coming. And I'm like, if your hair's not growing, it's because you're not getting nourishment. And
Hmm.
I will say it again and again. First two people who will know if you're sick are your hairdresser and your dentist. They
Yep.
pick it out in 2 seconds flat. And my hairdresser, who's my best friend, knew I was sick before I even knew I was sick.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
she's like your hair, something's up with your hair, man. Like it's not growing, it's going flat. It's normally really full and curly. And she's like, Heather, like something's up here, right? And granted, a lot was me denial, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so I'm watching all these people talk about their getting jabbed here, like the weight loss shot,
Hmm.
and they're like getting extensions in their hair. I'm like, you could just stop taking the shot because you don't need it, my friend.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know. I think in 2 years, 2 years tops, there's going to be a whole nother movement for this because to me, it's an eating disorder. I don't know
It is.
why they're different than me. It's just socially acceptable, which
It
pisses me
is.
off even more, right?
Well, and it's interesting too because, the when you look at primarily people who are starting these weight loss businesses, right? They're all usually owned by women or by really rich men who are wanting women to look how they want to look. And it's often women who've struggled with their own capacity and now they're selling a quick fix to other people who are struggling with this capacity. It is entirely a medically okay and approved form of an eating disorder. And it's
Mhm.
and it's celebrated as a fix or a health thing. And in the United States, we have the opposite problem where the obesity is so horrific too that that's also causing its own health issues, and that this is helping with diabetes from our horrific food and lack of regulation. And eating disorders on another side, as far as binge eating and all of that, that is can also very much be an eating disorder. It doesn't always look like starving yourself or being underweight, you know? And now we're using that as a treatment for that type of eating disorder as well. And so it's become an approved sense of a medication who are on people on one side of the spectrum to keep themselves thin and to be in control of their body type. And then it's being approved as a treatment for the binge eating disorder side as a way for you to lose weight and become healthier. But like, why are we not talking or doing any type of treatment or education on the mental processes of why we're on either one of these fences, you know?
Well, and that's it. And I see a lot of people on there thinking that they found the holy grail, right? And a lot of I get really, really, really pissy when people spread misinformation. I'm not against this shot. My husband's diabetic.
Yeah.
He needs it, right? And yes, there is a side effect to it, which would
Hmm.
be the weight loss. But if you got 20 pounds to lose, you don't need this bloody shot. Go walk
No.
around the block, my friend. Right?
Yeah. Well, and a
And
lot of it's diet. And if you have a disordered eating pattern, you need to figure out why. And if you're unable to, if it's difficult for you to change your diet on either side of the spectrum, whether changing from unhealthy eating habits to healthy eating habits or portion control on either side, whether you are not eating enough to have effective weight loss, because any trainer will tell you too that if you're wanting to get really fit, you have to eat enough. Um, but it's all a food control thing, and it's all an addiction thing, and then it's just you get thrown into this catapult where like you need your body to look a specific way. The trainers are telling you to do a specific thing, don't eat or eat too much or don't eat enough or but if it's at the point where you can't change your eating patterns, you need to understand what the addiction is to your food and why. And whether that's an addiction to unhealthy eating habits, whether that's binge eating, whether that's not eating enough, whether it's the type of food that you're eating, why specifically. Like for me, I have my safe foods that are very safe for me. I'm neurodivergent. I'm very specific on textures and patterns, and um, I have to know what to expect. And so, like, for me to change my eating patterns, I'm like, oh, now I understand. It's because I needed to control sensory wise, partly what was in my food, and then it's meeting it there. Um, and it's sad to watch a whole world push focus on the wrong treatment, you know?
yeah, no, and I understand the sensory. Like, I just, back in the day, it was a picky eater, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My sister will not eat anything white and creamy. No mayo, no ranch. No, no, like hell to the no, right? I'm not going to eat seafood. Hell to the no, right? I remember I was in the hospital with my eating disorder and I'm there like dying.
Yeah.
And they tried feeding me eggs. And I'm like, I'm not going to eat an egg. And they're like, oh, it's your eating disorder. No, I haven't eaten eggs since I was 5. They grossed me out. It's
I just
not
don't
going
like
to happen.
eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that part. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
But I think as long as you know why you're doing it, it's not
Hmm.
an unhealthy, right?
No,
Same with
it's not at all.
exercise in recovery.
Yeah.
That's a very another hot topic. A lot of people say, nope, never allowed to exercise again in your life. I am
No,
one of those people. I need movement. I'm not
same.
going to go run down the street. Like if I'm running, so should you, man. Like I'm not a runner, but like I like dancing and I like
Yeah.
going for a walk around the block and you
Yeah, I
know,
love hot yoga. Like yoga is like become my like safe exercise because if I get on a treadmill, I will run myself till I throw up because it's in my brain that that's what I do. Like I can't do it. But if I go to a yoga class, I feel strong, I feel confident, I feel healthy. And then after I want to fuel my body because I feel strong, healthy, and beautiful and confident. Like you don't have to swear off exercise. You just have to find what feels best for your body and what's not triggering to your body.
right, exactly, exactly. So I have a question.
Yeah.
So you got sick before you had children,
Hmm.
and um I already had my kids because my eating disorder, bulimia, anorexia, was pushed by a traumatic event. Uh,
Okay.
so and that was well, it happened in 2016, but it
Okay.
ramped up at 2021 was like so
The
anyway.
full
Yeah,
send
oh yeah,
button.
yeah, yeah. And then in the hospital for a month, right? Feeding tube, every machine known to man. I was 84 pounds and I'm 5'10".
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's horrific.
I should be dead. I honestly should.
Yeah.
And I have doctors look at me, they're like, we don't know why you're not dead. I'm like, well, thank you. Ah,
You're like, glad I'm not, but
okay. Right? Look at me defying odds. But what was that like when you got pregnant and the eating disorder is still alive and well in like in your head? How did you push through that?
it was really hard. My pregnancy with my first, I actually had hyperemesis gravidarum, which is like severe horrific morning sickness. So I
Oh,
literally threw up morning to night. And it was really interesting because we got to this point. I was seeing a midwife at the time and around 5 months pregnant. She was like, how much of mental ability, like your subconscious addicted part of your brain. And so halfway through my pregnancy, we switched from heavy antiemetics and IV fluids to acupuncture and massage and therapy. And it was a game changer, actually. It helped me get to the end of my pregnancy. And that, I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay. I was like,
Oh,
um, better.
you're delayed. Oh,
Give it a second. It's coming back.
yeah.
I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on with it.
It's okay. We can
Um,
slice and splice, so we can just start at that
Perfect.
question.
Um, yeah, so I think during pregnancy and realizing that was one of the first times that I realized how connected my subconscious and addiction in my brain and my body was. And it was a really big struggle for me to go through the physical changes of pregnancy. I also realized in my early 30s that I don't necessarily identify as a woman either. I feel very non-binary. And through a lot of therapy and things like that, it was really that discovering my body and not feeling necessarily at home in my body. Um, that was really tied to why puberty was so difficult and why pregnancy was so difficult for me because it was completely out of my control that my body was becoming more feminine when I didn't really necessarily feel like that felt right for me. Um, and so it was hard. I really had to do a lot of therapy to and a lot of mind work and reminding myself that I had to nourish my baby. And I worked with a nutritionist who really was great about helping me kind of meet my sensory needs and my nutrition needs and making sure that all of these people were like, oh, drink smoothies, drink smoothies. I can't do smoothies. Smoothies are a sensory thing for me that instantly, like, I cannot do them. And I think it's very tied to how much throwing up I've done in my life. Like the texture just is too
Yep.
much.
Yep.
Um, and so I can't do smoothies. And she was like, well, then, like, don't do a smoothie. Let's make you protein bars instead, something that's very textured that you can have cold because I really like cold foods. And it was one of the like first circumstances in my life where I started to be able to see all of those little pieces of like, okay, that's not a bad food because it's going to make me gain weight, but it's a nourishing food. And certain foods that I don't want to eat, it's not because I'm trying to starve myself, it's because I have a visceral response to why I don't want to eat those. And once you can kind of start to connect those pieces, my second and third pregnancies were much better mental health wise. Because I had gone through that. I had that mental pathway in my brain that I had really established and worked hard for. But it was really tough. It was really, really hard. Um, and it ultimately I just had to remind myself I was not eating for me at that point. And like I had to completely remove my physical body from it. And that was really one of the only ways I really got through and why I think my pregnancy did okay, but I had very difficult pregnancies because of um, my body, and I have an severe autoimmune condition. I have lupus and some fibromyalgia. I have some heart issues. They think it's likely due to the damage from the eating disorder during puberty and during growth. Um, and I struggle hormonally sometimes and like big hormone swings. And so it's just being aware of like all of those pieces, but it's also kind of a reminder to myself when I'm like, you can do damage. Like you're doing damage. And now that I'm at a healthy enough point where I can kind of remove myself from that and be like, that's okay. We don't, if we're gonna eat this, like how do we need to eat it? If I have to eat it a stupid way at 30 some odd years old
Right.
so that I can eat it, that's gonna be okay.
Oh, for sure. I say that. I don't care if you want to eat with like a McDonald's bib around your neck, right?
That's what
Like,
makes you happy, man. Go for it. That's your
right?
comfort and you're confident.
It like as long as it's helping, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's so hard, and yeah, I'm glad you got to that point of like just understanding you are a vessel for
Hmm.
somebody else at the point,
Yeah.
right? And like you gotta like have an outer body experience almost.
Yeah.
Even in recovery, I found that like I don't know if you did. I locked myself in a room and stayed there, old school style, right? It's the only thing that
Yeah.
worked for me. I had watched certain TV shows. I couldn't watch. I lived on Gilmore Girls and like Hallmark.
Hmm.
I had watched Happy Happy Joy Joy shows. I couldn't watch anybody in a bikini. I couldn't
Yeah.
watch anyone thin. I couldn't like I was just a mess, right?
Yeah. I definitely had to be very cognizantly aware of the media I was consuming. And then like I had to catch myself if I was scrolling on Instagram and somebody came up in a bikini, like catching myself, my thoughts was like the
Mm-hmm.
hardest thing I had to learn how to do, where like I would instantly be like, ooh, I want to look like that. Ooh, look at her collarbones. Ooh, look at that part. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Nope, 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 nope. We're not
Yeah.
doing that. Like, we're not doing that. She's beautiful. I love that swimsuit. Her hair looks gorgeous. We're not looking at her body. Like, let's read the caption. And I've had to like rewrite the narrative in my brain. And I mean, this has been, I've been working on this part of my recovery now for, let's see, I'm 32. I would say like I really started to get to a good mental space when I was around 2021. So about 10, 11 years. And I'm just, still at this point where it's every day something I have to cognizantly be aware of. And especially as a mother of my my three biological children that I've had are all female. And um gosh, even just being aware of what I submit them to or what I say out loud or how I think about my body, the way I look at my body, the way I pinch my body. I did not realize. Like, I get into like, I'm wearing this cute little bodysuit and I get in and I turn around and I instantly pinch my freaking love handle. Why did I do that? I know that's not have anything to do with anything. What is that? Even now, I'm like at 32 after, and I'm like, if my kid sees me pinching a part of my body to see the volume that is there, like that is something that she's going
Yeah.
to think about. And I don't want that. And it's a daily occurrence where I have to catch myself still.
Yeah. No, it's hard to unlearn things.
Hmm.
It's very hard. And it's just going to be a work in progress, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I was talking about, I had a family member come over and I noticed her weight loss, a significant amount of weight. I hadn't seen her in over a year. And I actually said, hey, I noticed, right?
Yeah.
And then I put it out on my TikTok and I said, should I have said something? And then someone replied back, no, why would you say? But I've lived 1,000 lives, my friend. Like I used to
Hmm.
be very, very heavy, lost weight, no eating disorder, putting that out there.
Just like healthy weight loss.
Lost over 100 pounds, took 2 years to do it, stayed
That's
at that
healthy.
weight
Amazing.
for 20 something years until this other thing came up. But
Mm.
I didn't say it to be like rude or mean. I just said, "Hey, I noticed."
Yeah.
Then I thought, should I have said something? And then
Yeah.
I
And
had
it's,
another family member come over the next day, notice that they lost weight, and I get my big mouth shut because now I'm just like, I don't know what to say. I
yeah.
don't.
I think for me, the biggest thing is when somebody says, hey, I noticed you lost weight. You look great. That's the problem. I think for me, it's more like, hey, you've lost a lot of weight. Was that intentional? And then that you can kind of like, oh, no, I've been going through a lot of hard things in my life. I've been really depressed and I haven't been taking good care of myself. I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, do you need some support in that? Or, yeah, I picked up this new workout program and I've been working really hard. And like, I'm so glad that you noticed it. So I think not necessarily saying things because, you know, our weight is tied to our physical health, right?
Mhm.
And in large shifts, whether you're gaining large shifts of amounts of weight or you're losing a large amount of weight, that can really be tied to somebody's mental health, their physical circumstance, their literal physical health. And so I don't think it's necessarily a problem to say that you've noticed, but I think the problem is like, hey, you've lost a lot of weight. You look great. And when somebody's like, no, I don't look great. I've been going through the hardest time of my life and I haven't been
Right.
beating myself. And like, I feel like absolute hell. That's like, but they're going to go like, oh, thanks, you know? And so I don't think as a society we should necessarily be afraid to be like, hey, I've noticed a big change. I think it's more just coming at like, hey, I've noticed a change. Was that an intentional change? And if so, like, how can I support you in that? Or if it's not, how can I support you in that too?
Right. Yeah. And this person, I am related to them. I
Yeah.
know they've been doing what they've been doing, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, and that
I
makes the
mean,
difference
granted, I don't
too.
know what goes on behind closed doors, but this has been going on for, it was a health redirection, I guess, like,
Good.
just like different changes, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
we're going to walk to the store instead of drive.
Love that.
Little things like that,
Picking
right?
healthier food
Yeah.
choices.
And
And
it's
that you
been
should be like, that's
nine
amazing.
years. I've been watching this go on for 9 years, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I just
And I
hadn't
think,
seen them in a while.
yeah. And I, that's where, I really think it's about intention. And I think too, that's where that self-awareness comes in, where like, where is my comment coming from? Is
Yeah.
my comment coming from a like, oh, you look great. Like, look, I can see your collarbones, like your jawline, like those like very specific triggering things that like those are for me when my eating disorder, jawline, collarbones, hip bones were like a big thing for me. And so when I see a thin person, I have to really focus myself of like
Yeah.
not looking at those pieces. So I think it's just being aware of like, where is that comment coming from? Is that coming from a triggering tragic point in my brain? Or am I coming from like, oh, I care about you and I know you've been working hard, being aware. And
Yeah.
then when you have those moments being like, you know what, like good for me. It came from a good point and it didn't come from a tragic point or a triggering point. Like give yourself a pat on the back because you're rewriting that pathway in your brain,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
and that's the thing, right? Like it wasn't put there in overnight.
Hmm.
So it's just going to have to be one of those things. You got to work at it, got to work at it, got to keep going. Sometimes it's, easier days than
Yeah.
others, but
Yeah.
it can be
Well,
done.
it can be, and it definitely can be. And I think obviously that's literally what I teach on day in and day out is if you can be kind of aware of where your thoughts are coming from and being intentional with your actions, ensuring that they're lining up with where you are in your recovery or in your journey, um, that's you're not going to hit the mark every time. You're not going to be able to drown out what society says. You're not going to be able to not hear the comment that somebody is going to say something, whether you've gained weight or lost weight. Like you're going to hear that. Um, but our mind is our biggest superpower,
Yeah.
genuinely. And if you can stay connected and you can work through that and evaluate why you feel that way and look at it from an accepting point and say, like, you know what? Yeah, I think that way. That's been told to me a lot of my life. I'm not going to act on it though. Like that is the point of power. And you're just taking that power back. And when you can switch your control from I have to have control what goes into my mind to I have control of my action, like it really helps catapult your recovery into a different space.
That is the best uh endorphin hit, I guess would be
Yeah.
knowing that you get your power back. There's
Yeah.
something like once you do one little thing, I don't care what it is. I don't
Mhm.
care what it is. I don't care if it's like you had the smallest piece of chocolate and you said, I did it. And you
Yeah.
didn't flip out, right? And then you do it again and you do it. It's like a little snowball, right? And
Hmm.
it just gets bigger. And you just get on this choo-choo train of wellness and you get a high from that. It's a totally different thing. I remember when I went and had my first tea with sugar and milk in it. And
Big
I was at
things.
my doctor's office. I'm like, do you know how good tea tastes with sugar and milk? Right? He's like, okay, Heather,
Yeah.
what now? And oh, yeah, it was like the best day of my life, right?
Yeah.
Are all days like that? No, no, I'm not going to sit here and lie. But it's tea. Like, seriously, like, you think I won a million?
And honestly, like that's
But
where
you
you
got to play
find,
off that, though.
yeah. And that's where you find that abundance. And like abundance isn't necessarily like having everything that you need physically, right? Like a lot of people equate abundance to that, but abundance is actually a mindset.
Hmm.
And when you get into that abundance mindset where like I can live with all my needs met, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look a certain way or look how I thought it was going to way, but when you can start to find gratitude in those little things and you can kind of start to unlock that abundance mindset, it's a snowball, like you said, and you literally will change the entire narrative in your brain if you allow it to happen. But it takes work and it takes a lot of overriding what has been there and what has been built up and been repeated to you so many times that it is now in your own voice. Like it takes a lot of time to overwork that and override that. And so you got to find the gratitude and those little tiny glimmer moments, like relish in that power because it's hard. Be proud of the control and the power that you take when you control your action, especially when that is an action that is going against what is in your brain and what your brain is telling you is part of this narrative. And you can catch it and say, screw that. I'm going to do this my way and what's best for my body. Like those, that's how you get to recovery is holding on to those and living from that piece where I'm going to live every piece like this. And you can. It takes work, but you can.
I love that you say gratitude. I'm a big ask, believe, receive kind of person. Thank you, thank you. I wake up every morning. Thank you. Since
Yeah.
my, I don't know how the day is going to go, but thank you.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And honestly, and that's the big thing too. Like I like that doesn't even have to be tied to like a religion sense or anything like that. Like we can find gratitude in our daily circumstances regardless of that what you believe or things like that. I know for me, when I was kind of coming out of a lot of religious trauma, I was worried about finding gratitude, like I was having to thank something that I didn't necessarily believe in. And you have to shift that really it's just like finding gratitude in your own brain power is one of the first things that you can do. Like find gratitude in what you are doing internally. The rest of the world is out of our control. But if you can find that gratitude and appreciation for the work you are doing, like you're going to go somewhere.
I talk to myself on a daily basis. Great conversation. And
Yeah,
that's all I
honestly,
say. Good job,
I'm one of
Heather.
my
Good
favorite
job, Heather.
people.
Good job, Heather. You have to be your own cheerleader. I say it
Yeah,
all the time. You are MVP, VIP, all the letters in the alphabet. It's you, my
yeah.
friend. You are stuck with you. And you got to get on team
You have to
you.
be your own bestie, man. Like
Yeah,
you have to be able to have that internal monologue and call it like I can call my closest friend out on her bullshit. Why I should be able to do that to my own brain? Like I should be
right.
that connected to my brain where I can say, that eating disorder part's still there, but I'm gonna call your shit out because I know that's not what's true. Um, but you have to have that open dialogue in your brain. You have to be connected to yourself to even be able to do that. And if you're not connected, you're not ever going to get to that point in your own mind where you can be louder than the other voices in your head.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes that. I like yelling at myself and in
Mhm.
the shower. I always have a great conversation in the shower, right? And I'm just like, shut up. I'm either crying in the shower or talking to myself, but maybe both. It's very cathartic.
I drive a lot for my job, and that's my time. I'll either have music blasting so loud that I can't hear my own thoughts so that I can just connect to my body, or I will drive in complete silence and just argue with myself the whole time.
Right? Yeah, right. This is why we're friends now, right? Yeah, and you gotta find your people, right? You gotta find
Yes.
your people. You gotta find, as you put it, a pod, right?
Hmm.
We're all orcas.
You do.
We're mammals. We need to be in groups.
Yep.
So you got to find
Build
your
that
people.
community.
You
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of people on this planet. I'm sure you're going to like one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully. Well,
Right?
and you need people that reiterate the narrative in your head too, right?
Yeah.
Because like we do as humans, like we need community. We need those people around us. And especially when your entire community has had a very toxic narrative your entire life. The only way to really start to heal that part of your brain is to start replacing it with healthy, positive narration from other people in your life. And that means being really selective about the people that you put in your life. And it's really hard sometimes to put up those boundaries, especially when those boundaries are people that you're related to or that you love very much. But it's tough, and you have to find your community so that you can rewrite that community narrative. And that way, when you don't have to cut those people out of your life, but
No,
that
but
way
you'll
when
get the tools to know how to deal
exactly.
with those people. right?
And that narrative isn't the primary narrative anymore. You know, it's a lot easier to go in that circumstance and say like, "Oh, that sounds great. You guys sound nuts," because my brain now is on like the right narrative.
Yeah,
Like, you know, and just like you said when you went to that funeral and you're hearing all these people bash themselves a few years ago, that probably would not have even crossed your mind that that was a toxic like speaking environment. That it wouldn't have. And
yeah.
because that was the narrative that you were normalized. And until you start to be with people who change your narrative, you like come back into those situations and you're like, wow, like this is crazy. Y'all sound nuts. I'm going to go back to the people with a decent narrative so that we can all build each other back up and
Yeah.
get on a good mindset and I can prevent myself from regressing.
And I totally believe negative spreads negative. Negative will spread way faster than positive, my
Oh,
friend.
yeah.
Takes a lot of work to be a positive person in a day,
Hmm.
but I started doing the find one good thing that happened. Listen, I can have the crappiest day on earth, right? But one good thing.
Yeah.
Find the one
Yep.
good thing. If I saw
Yep.
a butterfly or my little my buddy, my hummingbird that comes and visits me, right? That brings me joy. Now,
Yep.
and it's little things, right? Find what makes you happy. Watching
Well, and I
panda
think
bear
when you,
videos all day long.
yeah, when you get to that point where you're like, okay, I'm in a shitty mind space. Now I know what tools, like I need to go for a walk to go find a butterfly so that I don't want
Yeah,
to off myself, right? Like, or so that I don't want to puke all day. Like when you, that's the, like, that's taking your power back. When you can get to the point where like, you know what? Today sucks. My brain is not my friend today. It is very loud. I, I'm very not in a good space, but you can say, okay, I'm going to go find some gratitude. Like I don't have it. I'm going to go put myself in a circumstance to find it. That's taking your power back. That's recovery.
yeah, I fully agree. Oh man, I need you to come back. I love you.
I love you. I come back anytime you want. I love
Oh,
podcasting.
oh,
It's so
okay.
fun.
So tell. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my voice. Tell the people where we can find you.
I am on LinkedIn for Brit Sandaval. I am on Instagram at Brit Sandaval Speaks. And then my podcast is the Odd Mom Pod. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts, or my website is oddmompod.com. And if you have someone that you're wanting, if you have a team that you're wanting to come in and talk about authenticity, inclusive leadership, things like that, you can find all of my speaking stuff on britsandaval.com.
We'll have to have you back for that one. But I didn't even
Yes,
get to all my questions. Yes, you need to come back.
I will come back anytime. I've loved it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany. And don't
Thank
ask
you.
her if she's related to Tom Sandoval because she's not.
I'm not, I don't know who Tom Sandoval is, but you know what? The Sandovals are pretty cool people. So,
I don't know. Now you gotta watch Vanderpump Rules. Then you
well,
might
maybe I
change your
will.
mind.
Maybe I won't agree with that.
Have a good day, doll.
All right. Bye.